Picture this. You wake up at 4:30 a.m. to the sound of a rooster screaming in your ear. There's no snooze button, there's no coffee, and that bathroom you need to use, it's a hole in the ground outside, and you're sharing it with about 20 other people. Welcome to your life in medieval Europe, where a simple toothache could literally kill you, but somehow you'd still get more vacation days than a modern American worker. I'm about to blow your mind with what life was really like back then, because almost everything you think you know is dead wrong. First, let's talk about the ultimate pyramid scheme that wasn't actually a scheme: feudalism. Imagine if Jeff Bezos owned literally everything, but instead of Amazon Prime, he had knights in metal suits. At the very top, you've got kings who own entire countries just because their great-great-grandfather killed the right people. Below them, nobles got chunks of land in exchange for providing soldiers. These guys lived in drafty stone castles and spent their days hunting wild boar and planning who to stab next. Then you had knights, basically professional killers with a code of honor that they broke whenever convenient. And at the bottom, making up 90% of the population, were the peasants. These weren't just poor people. They were literally owned by the land. If the land got sold, they got sold with it, like a really depressing real estate package deal. But here's where it gets wild. A peasant's day started before sunrise, not because they were ambitious, but because they literally starved if they didn't work every single daylight hour. They'd wake up in a one-room house that they shared with their entire family and their animals. Yes, you slept next to cows. The smell was indescribable. For breakfast, they'd have bread so hard it could probably stop a sword, washed down with ale. Not because they were alcoholics, but because water would kill you faster than a plague rat. Even 5-year-old kids drank beer for breakfast. The alcohol killed the deadly bacteria that lived in medieval water supplies. Now, while peasants were eating rock-hard bread, nobles were throwing parties that would make a modern billionaire weep with envy. Picture this: a feast where they served entire roasted peacocks, still covered in feathers and looking like they might fly away. They'd stuff the peacock with the chicken, stuff the chicken with the rabbit, stuff the rabbit with herbs, and call it dinner. It was like medieval turducken, but more ridiculous. And sugar? Sugar was so expensive that nobles would show off by having elaborate sugar sculptures at their parties. Imagine spending a year's salary on something that would melt in the rain just to prove you could afford it. But let's talk about something that will really shock you. Medieval people had better work-life balance than you do. Seriously. While you're grinding through your 40-hour work week with maybe 2 weeks of vacation, medieval peasants had over 150 holy days off every year. That's nearly half the year. They had so many religious festivals that the Catholic Church actually had to tell people to stop partying and get back to work. During these festivals, things got absolutely wild. People would elect a Lord of Misrule, who could basically do whatever they wanted for a day. Imagine if your most chaotic friend became your boss for 24 hours, and you'll get the idea. They had drinking contests, wrestling matches, and something called football, which was basically a town-wide riot with a ball involved. And speaking of riots, let's destroy another myth. You've been told medieval people thought the earth was flat, right? Complete nonsense. Educated medieval people knew the earth was round. They had been calculating its circumference since ancient times. The flat earth thing was made up by 19th century writers who wanted to make medieval people look stupid. Here's another shocker. Medieval people weren't walking around covered in filth like extras from Game of Thrones. They actually cared a lot about being clean. Cities had public bathhouses where people would go to wash, socialize, and catch up on gossip. It was like a medieval spa day. People changed their linen underclothes regularly, which was their version of taking a shower. The really dirty period came later during the Renaissance, when people became convinced that water was dangerous and bathing would make you sick. Medieval people were actually cleaner than their so-called enlightened descendants. But let's talk about the stuff that would actually terrify you. Medieval medicine was a fascinating combination of this might actually work and this will definitely kill you. They understood that willow bark could reduce pain, which makes sense because it contains the same ingredient as aspirin. But they also thought that illness was caused by an imbalance of 4 bodily fluids called humors, and the cure was often to drain out the bad blood until you passed out. A simple infection could turn into a death sentence. That splinter in your finger? It might kill you in a week. Childbirth was basically Russian roulette. About 1 in 5 women died giving birth. And if you made it to age 30, you were considered middle-aged. Yet, somehow, in the middle of all this death and hardship, medieval people created some of the most beautiful art and architecture in human history. Those massive Gothic cathedrals that still take your breath away, they were built by people who had never seen a crane or power tool, just human hands, simple machines, and pure determination. And here's something that'll blow your mind. Medieval people were constantly innovating. They invented eyeglasses, mechanical clocks, and windmills. They developed new farming techniques that could feed more people. They created the first universities. The idea that medieval times were a dark age with no progress is another myth created by people who wanted to make the Renaissance look better by comparison. The guild system meant that if you were a blacksmith's son, you'd probably become a blacksmith. But you'd become the best damn blacksmith possible. Masters took pride in their craft, which would put modern artisans to shame. A medieval carpenter couldn't just slap together some furniture and call it a day. His reputation and his family's future depended on every joint being perfect. Women's lives were harder in many ways, but not as restricted as you might think. Peasant women worked alongside men in the fields. In cities, women ran businesses, brewed beer, and managed large households. Some women, like Hildegard of Bingen, became renowned scholars and mystics whose writings are still studied today. And the stories they told, before Netflix, before books, before even widespread literacy, entertainment was live and interactive. Professional storytellers would travel from town to town, spinning tales of knights, dragons, and impossible love affairs. The audience would cheer for heroes, boo villains, and demand their favorite stories be told again and again. So what's the real takeaway from all this? Medieval life was brutally hard, but it wasn't the grim, colorless existence that movies show us. It was a world where people found joy in community festivals, took pride in their craftsmanship, and created beauty in the midst of hardship. They lived with death as a constant companion, which paradoxically made them appreciate life in ways we've forgotten. Sure, you probably wouldn't want to actually live back then. The smell alone would probably knock you unconscious. But maybe, just maybe, we could learn something from people who knew how to celebrate 150 days a year without feeling guilty about it. What do you think? Could you handle waking up next to a cow every morning if it meant getting half the year off? Drop a comment and let me know which medieval job you'd want. And remember, influencer wasn't an option back then.